Tashi Delek and welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly news edition on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's have a look at today's headlines. His Holiness takes pilgrimage to Jokhang. Sister of Tibetan political prisoner Dorjee Tashi expresses concern over Dorjee's well-being. Central Tibetan Administration holds International Tibet Youth Forum. Tenzin Delek Rinpoche Medal of Courage awarded to Gonpo and Dorjee Tashi. US delegation meets Deputy Speaker of Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile. Kalon Dolma concludes visit to Japan. Seattle VTech members meet Congresswoman Schrier, seeks support for US-Tibet bill. Tibetan-Chinese seminar discusses legacy of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and future of Tibet. Representative Genkhang attends Parents' Day at Jamyang Lophel Sunday School. Central Tibetan Administration steps forward to relieve flood-hit Tibetans in Delhi and Kullu-Manali. On Friday last week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama drove from Shivedzi into Leh city, where he made pilgrimage to Jokhang, the principal Buddhist temple in the town. His Holiness advised the audience to work to maintain inter-religious harmony and to keep in mind that those with little interest in religion can still benefit from adopting secular ethics. Before setting off to return to Shivedzi, His Holiness met with a number of Tibetan Muslims from Leh who used to live in Lhasa and greeted them warmly. His Holiness on Tuesday wrote a warm thank you note to everyone who wished him on his 88th birthday. His Holiness reassured to live more than 100 years and said he is committed to continue to be in service of others. A recent news coming from Tibet, Gonpo, the sister of Dorjee Tashi, a renowned Tibetan entrepreneur imprisoned for life on trumped-up charges of loan fraud, was seen expressing deep concern about his well-being and asking for permission to visit him in a video that was widely circulated on Thursday, 13 July. In the video, Gonpo was heard saying she was prohibited from writing a letter to her brother and visitation to prison was cancelled, and the Chinese officials threatened her to cut off her communication access or imprison her if she persisted, when she urged the authority to proceed with her request in accordance with the Constitution. For the past 3 years, the Public Security Bureau officers in Lhasa denied Gonpo from visiting her brother in prison. After repeated appeals from Ki in 2021, she was allowed only once to talk to Dorjee Tashi through a video call. In the year that follows, she was blocked from making any contact with Dorjee Tashi in prison. Dorjee Tashi was initially arrested on 10 July 2008 on suspicion of making donations to Tibetans in exile from Tibet and providing covert funding to Tibetan protesters. On Tuesday this week, a 3-day International Tibet Youth Forum was held in Dharamshala. His Holiness the Dalai Lama sent in a video message to the participant of the forum. His Holiness explained that the cause of Tibet is not only political, it is also about establishing world peace by training the mind on the basis of reason.
첩시 계시고 말다. 맞아 벽이 된다디. 아니 점물린 디강기 배 시. 삼류토네 뭐냐 전에기 시디. 균전 대배토네 야도 섬리야. 아니 참보다 인지 학습이야 빼니. 아니 심지어 탐제 대나자는 점물린 디강기 draw media to Samololia, she Pamado, Shida, Marshi, Chinjin, Digitone, Samololia, Yendu Deni. Any somewhat the order what the domain to be Dusane, good petted to Sabashigi, Loshingazu, Ta, Nazu, Minale, Jumde Gana, any band Nalende Kava, Luju. Yapsel so the Madu ships how tall down the possibility, down under the Junzi.
Sigyong Pimpa sitting of the Central Tibetan Administration presided over the inaugural session along with Secretary Kama Chuing and Additional Secretary Tenzin. Sikyong expressed his happiness and hoped that the Tibetan movement would be strengthened through the forum. He added that now the responsibility of the movement rests upon the shoulders of this generation and said this forum provides them the opportunity to interact and know about Tibet cause and more. Kalon spoke at the valedictory session of the forum. The forum, organized by the Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration, saw the attendance of more than 100 Tibetan youth from over 16 countries. The guest speakers invited to interact with youth include former Envoy of His Holiness the Dalai Lama Khyentse Genkhang, former Chief Election Commissioner Tashi, Director of Library of Tibetan Works and Archives Geshe Lador, Executive President of CREDA Dr. Michael Van Walt Van Praag, Professor Tsangtruk Topla, College of Higher Tibetan Studies, former Tibetan parliamentarian Kinzom Dongdu, and former political prisoner Pinzong Nyiden. On Wednesday last week, on the 8th death anniversary of prominent Tibetan political prisoner late Tulku Tenzin Delek Rinpoche, Sikyong Pempa Sring of the Central Tibetan Administration attended the conferral Tenzin Delek Rinpoche Medal of Courage. Dorjee Tashi, a well-known Tibetan entrepreneur who the Chinese authorities detained in 2008 as part of the communist government's response to a massive uprising in Tibet, and his sister Gonpo, who held a series of overt protests to seek justice for her brother, are the recipient of this year's Tenzin Delek Rinpoche Medal of Courage. The award ceremony was jointly organized by the Tibetan Women Association, National Democratic Party of Tibet, Students for Free Tibet, and International Tibet Network in honor of the renowned late political prisoner's life and his courage. An hour-long interactive session was held between Sikyong Pempa Sring and some 50 Tibetan students from abroad on Friday last week, during which the students were apprised on the significance of Tibet and the political approach of the Central Tibetan Administration in resolving the Sino-Tibet conflict. One group of the visiting students from Europe and US are participants of the Summer Tibetan Study program, while the other group is from Belgium's Tibetan Language and Cultural School, who are on a week-long education tour of Dharamshala. On Thursday last week, a delegation of the United States comprised of Ryan Faresi, senior advisor to the Undersecretary Azra Zia, the United States Special Coordinator for Tibetan Issue, along with other officials, Representative Dr. Namgyal Chudu of the Office of Tibet, Washington, D.C., and Tenchoy Gyatso, the president of the International Campaign for Tibet, visited the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile and met with Deputy Speaker Dolma Genkhang and members of the Standing Committee. During their meeting, they discussed important issues of common interest and exchanged ideas through a question and answer session. Kalon of the Department of Information and International Relations concluded her week-long visit to Japan. Accompanied by Dr. Arya Tsawang-Gyalpo, representative of Office of Tibet, Japan, Kalon met with the members of Tibet Support Group in Japan and discussed with them the plans of the Central Tibetan Administration and sought their opinion and cooperation. One important schedule was the meeting with Shimomura Hagubun, chairman of the Japan Parliamentary Support Group for Tibet, and the members of the working committee of the group at the Japan Parliament building. Kalon thanked the chairman and the members for their political and humanitarian support to the Tibetans. The parliamentarians assured continued support and assistance and expressed great respect for His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the goal of the Central Tibetan Administration. Kalon visited 2 universities and talked to the students and faculties on the Tibet issue. Kalon thanked the chairman and the faculties for educating young Tibetans and promised that they will play a great role in building Japanese resources in the Tibetan community. Kalon gave an exclusive interview to Kyoto Tushin News and addressed a press conference at Shinguchu Bunga Center, where more than 11 major and local media participated. Kalon briefed the media on the situation in Tibet, the status of dialogue, Chinese policy, and expectations from the media. She released the book Chipetto no Hanron, a Japanese version of the book Harnessing the Dragon's Fume by Representative Dr. Arya Tsawang-Gyalpo. Kalon gave a keynote address as a chief guest at the 2nd Mongol Tibet Cultural and Religious Symposium at the University of Tokyo, where more than 15 scholars spoke and presented papers. More than 100 people participated in the symposium. A virtual discussion on the legacy of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the future status of Tibet was organized last Tuesday by the US-based Sunrise Media. The meeting was attended by Representative Kesa Genzebawa of the Office of Tibet, Taiwan, Chuldim Gyalzo, Chinese Liaison Officer of Washington, D.C., and Dawa Sangmo, Chinese Liaison Officer of Canberra's Office of Tibet. The other speakers at the virtual session include Hu Ping, Chief Editor of Beijing Spring, Shen Shui, Democratic Rights Activist, Lily Ten, representative from Taiwan, and Fang Tongyi, professor in Sydney. The Chinese speakers at the meeting unequivocally issued statements commending the relevance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teaching of compassion and altruism in today's world, while expressing hope for a prompt resolution of the Sino-Tibet conflict. The Tibetan community members from Seattle, Washington met with Congresswoman Kim Schrier on 1st July and urged her to support the bipartisan US-Tibet bill in the House, as well as inform her about Tibet's worsening human rights situation. The group also included several members of the voluntary Tibet advocacy group led by Pasang Phuti, advocacy coordinator for the Tibetan Association of Washington, and a WeTag member. On Tuesday this week, Representative Genkhang attended the Parents' Day at Jamyang Lophel Sunday School. It is the weekend Tibetan school run by the Tibetan Cultural Center in 6 different locations in Belgium. There are 341 students, 45 teachers, and 17 volunteers at the schools. Every year, TCC organizes a week-long summer camp for the Tibetans, and one of the days is observed as Parents' Day. This year, 120 students aged 7 to 15 took part in the summer camp. Unlike in the past, this year they also saw the participation of students from France and Germany. The Department of Home, Central Tibetan Administration, upon hearing the report of Tibetans affected by flood and landslide caused by heavy rainfall in Delhi and Kullu-Manali, dispatched immediate relief support of Rs 3 lakh and 5 lakh respectively. The incessant rain in the past several days has caused major problems of flash floods and landslides in Himachal Pradesh, particularly in the areas of Kullu-Manali, and flood caused by the overflow of Yamuna River in Delhi. The Tibetan residents of Thobi, 15 Mile, and Yuluko in Kullu, and Tibetans of Samyeling Tibetan settlement, Majnuka Tila and Budh Vihar in Delhi were heavily affected by the onslaught of monsoon and flooding. No casualties in these Tibetan settlements have been reported so far. However, damages to houses were reported. That is all the news for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. Thank you for watching Tibet TV.